Hola, buenos dias. I want you to say this word with me. Kaya. Again, kaya. Kaya. Naguna bini nunuk janang. We've just had a very short conversation in the language of the Noongar people of Western Australia. It's a language that is 40, 50,000 years old. It is a language of nature, it is a language within nature. It's a language that describes nature. It talks about the unique values of the Australian landscape, the Australian biodiversity that we have, recognising that what we have in Australia really can't be found anywhere else, 85, 87% endemic to Australia. Of a population of some 28 million people, we have 40 million kangaroos. By some estimates, we have fewer koalas than Africa has elephants. And yet we've done a terrible job at looking after it. Who knows what this critter is, apart from the Australians? What is it? Call it out. The thylacine, thank you. This is the last thylacine, died in captivity in 1937. This photo is less than 100 years old. These are koala pelts. People were paid to go and harvest koalas. I thought I'd show you this graph. This is from the OECD report. You can Google it, it's online. And it's a graph that shows the amount of tax revenue linked to environmental programs. There's only one country that is zero, and that is Australia. Now, I am being a little bit unfair on ourselves that we collect and distribute tax revenue in a slightly different manner. The point I'm trying to make, from an Australian context, is we're not valuing nature, both at an intrinsic level, that nature has its every right to exist, but we don't value from an economic or financial perspective either. We're really missing it. In 1788, what we call the first fleet, the first Europeans arrived in Australia and bought cats. And if you read some of the journals of some of the early European explorers, people like Sturt and a couple of the others, they were seeing cats in the Australian landscape towards northern Australia within decades of Europeans first arriving in Australia. I'll talk more about cats in a moment, but feral cats and foxes are the primary driver of mammal extinctions and biodiversity loss in Australia. In 1855, there was a real drive by the English to recreate a sense of the English landscape in Australia, so they bought foxes to recreate the English landscape. For my Spanish friends, Iberian rabbits were introduced for sport in 1859. In 1925, the mosquito fish was brought in to eat mosquito larvae. Instead, it ended up eating the larvae of other things that were eating the mosquito larvae. Many of you would know this one. In 1935, cane toads were introduced to Australia. It has been a catastrophic impact on many of our mammals across northern Australia. And finally, in 2001, fire ants were detected in Queensland and have started having an impact down through Queensland and some parts of New South Wales. Europeans arrived and we've royally screwed up the Australian landscape. We've had a major impact on what was an intact, functioning system within 200 years. We've lost species to extinction. As Sky said yesterday, we've got the worst mammal extinction on the planet. And it's easy to think that this is something that happened 100 years ago, even 50 years ago. But this is happening now, on our watch. The Christmas Island pipistrelle, a small bat, when extinct, was declared extinct only a few years back. One of the more recent ones was a critter called the bramblecue melames. It's a little sort of bandicoot-type creature, lived on these sandy atolls off the Australian coast, possibly one of the first critters to be lost through climate change in Australia. Whichever way you measure it, whichever way you want to cut a graph, biodiversity is in decline. And we see this all around the world. We've been talking about this over the last couple of days. Europeans arrived. We dispossessed Indigenous peoples off their land. We disrupted fire patterns. We introduced invasive species. We've pretty much been doing a great job of stuffing the place up. Most conservation failures are not ecological, they are human, and I think we all know that. Everything we do, one of the fundamental points I want to give you and leave with you, everything we do is about humanity, it's about people, it's about the relationships we have with each other, the relationships we have with our partners, the relationships we have with those that don't see eye to eye with us. And there's plenty of people who don't like what we're doing, but how can we find common language to bring people together? So enter Australian Wildlife Conservancy. We're a 35-year-old organisation. We were founded, of all things, by a British gentleman, Martin Copley. Martin made his wealth through insurance, so in the finance industry. And this is a really important point that I'd like to dwell on a little bit, particularly in the Australian context, that a number of organisations in Australia came out of the environmentalism movement. AWC didn't. Martin wanted a business-like operation in a not-for-profit context. And he gave us what is probably his strongest legacy, for me at least, is the mission, the effective conservation of all Australian animals and the habitats in which they live. As the Chief Executive of AWC, I probably say that every single day when I'm at work. Everything that I do, I filter through the lens, does it allow us to advance our mission? And about 10 years ago, and I'll come back and dwell on this in a moment, we established a vision, a world where Australia's biodiversity is valued and effectively conserved by an engaged community, recognising that we can't just put a line on a map, say that we work there. We have to think about how do we bring the community to us? How do we get the community to truly value nature? Martin started, see if that works, here in the far southwest of Western Australia at a place called Karakamaya, 270 hectare property, one of our smallest properties. And we went on this grand journey around Australia buying properties to the point that we, excuse me, if you aggregate all the land that we have access to, both land we manage, work in partnership and have access to, it's about 12.9 million hectares. It equates to about 1.7%, looking at an AWC person, 1.7% of Australia. So that's a significant chunk of Australia. That's why I've got no hair on my head. But it's led us to protect 65% of all Australian vertebrates. This graph is slightly out of date, but it brings a really interesting point in the journey and evolution of AWC. And it's something that, as you start to become leaders of organisations, and for those that are running organisations to dwell on, the orange dots are land that we acquired through acquisition, the land that we bought. So for the first 20 years of our journey, a lot of our growth came through outright acquisition. Then there's a bit of a change around 2010, 2011, which is when I came to AWC, but there was a change in that point where cattle prices went up, and a lot of land that we buy is cattle country. Cattle prices went up. We had the big billionaires in Australia start to buy vast tracts of land for cattle production. But I think one of the real tipping points was the emergence of carbon credit units and the emergence of investors in carbon credit properties. So we now compete for land with climate investors, those that are looking to make a commercial return out of the land. So it's driving the price up, and it's making quality land that we want to conserve and protect more scarce and harder to find. So our mission implies we need access to more land, so how do we do that? So we started to think, well, who has land? And we think about the Indigenous communities across Australia. What's called the Indigenous Protected Area Network has 122 million hectares of land. But often the stewards of that land have scarce financial resources and scarce human resources. So if we can align our values and mutual interests and build trust, can we work together to get a better outcome? Working with government agencies, public-private partnerships. And I think we learned a bit off African parks, and we started to develop our own versions of public-private partnerships. And I think critically, working with the pastoral industry, that I'll come back to in a moment. But I think the thing to dwell on here, going back to that point about humans and relationships, is it's one thing to buy land, put a line on a map, say that's ours, and we deploy the resources to it. When you go into a partnership model, there's a different set of skills required. It's about the relationship and the time you invest, and not underestimating the amount of time that you need to invest in building those relationships. And particularly with the First Nations community, We come from a background of some disgraceful and horrible behaviour by humans, by white people, against Indigenous peoples. We have to build a lot of trust, and that takes a lot of time, a lot of cups of teas, and a lot of engagement before you then can move forward. Same with the pastoral industry. Here we are, a bunch of greenies. Again, I don't wear dreadlocks on my head, I don't have enough hair, but we've got to find a way to build common language with the pastoral industry. So what do? Like many of you, it's about understanding the threats to the land that we manage. We heard yesterday from Sky, and we saw great imagery of Braden flying around the countryside. We deliver fire management. Australia is a fire-prone country. It's not about the absence of fire, it's about how do you use fire as an effective management tool in the context in which you operate in. Australia is a vast continent. It's about 85% of the size of the mainland United States. How you use fire is highly dependent upon the landscape in which you operate. But as that quote there, it's not just delivering fire management for fire management's sake, it's the impact that it leads to. We've reduced wildfire extent across our properties in Northern Australia by 50%, and it's leading to species like the Gouldian finch, a fire-sensitive bird, to start to respond right across Northern Australia. There's a property in North Queensland that we own called Brooklyn. We've owned it for about 25 years. We hadn't detected a Gouldian finch at that time until 2 years ago. We're now detecting Gouldian finches. So it's not doing activity for activity's sake, it's doing it for the outcome that you're trying to achieve. Managing feral herbivores, cattle, buffalo, camels. You might not know, but we've got the biggest wild camel population in the world. Donkeys, deer, goats, buffalo, you name it, we have to manage these species. Weed management, and a shout out to our African friends while we're sharing the love of invasive species. Buffel grass is a classic example. For those who know Australia, Alice Springs is in the central Australia. There's a road that runs out of Alice Springs called the Tanami Track, runs into the Tanami Desert. And about 10 kilometres out of town, you look across this vast plain, and there's grasses waving, and you see the mountain range in the distance, and the sun sets, and it's golden, and it's wondrous, and it's beautiful. It's all weeds. It's all buffel grass. It's introduced by pastoralists because it's great feed, it's resilient grass for the pastoral, for cattle, but it's terrible from a conservation point of view. It burns extremely hot, destroys the seed bank, outcompetes native grasses, which then leads to the improved success of feral cats and foxes in the landscape. Predominantly, our big issue in Australia is feral cats and foxes. Each year, cats and foxes kill 1.7 billion native animals in Australia. It's not hard to figure out why biodiversity is in decline. Cats, foxes, feral herbivores, habitat loss, and the impact of a changing climate. So I thought I'd quickly dwell on, because this is sort of another key part of organisational strategy, organisational management. In very general, simplistic terms, you have cats across the entirety of the landscape. Foxes typically go to the Tropic of Capricorn, that line there across Australia. In Northern Australia, we manage the threats through landscape management, fire management, feral herbivore control, etc. And we have the research that suggests that works. In Southern Australia, you have the dual impact of cats and foxes. And so we tend to use these fellas, very large fenced areas. These are rewilding projects where we eradicate the cats and foxes and we reintroduce regionally extinct species or species that are vulnerable. And these are vast areas. The fence is about 6 feet high. It's got electric wires on it. They average about 9,000 hectares, and there's an example of a fence there, 9,000 hectares. So these are very big areas. We reintroduce species and they become living in the wild in the absence of threats. And I didn't have enough time to put the slide in here, but one of our properties is called Mount Gibson in Western Australia, and we've reintroduced 10 regionally extinct species. On the outside of the fence, you walk across the ground is hard-packed. There's no leaf litter. When it rains, the leaf litter washes into the watercourses and off out of the system. You go inside the fence, and a lot of our mammals are digging animals, and there's all these forage pits, and the soil is soft and spongy. You scratch away the soil, and there's moisture inside. The vegetation is in better condition. The leaf litter is falling into those little forage pits and degrading into the soil and improving soil quality. It has this benefit beyond the intrinsic right of the species to exist. It's also improving the health of the landscape. And here's an example of bilby, one of our famous animals. It's the AWC logo that you'll see on the inside of a fence, and a hungry-looking feral cat on the outside of a fence. We've got a vast suite of our mammals are in what's called the critical weight range, perfect prey size, perfect sandwich size for a cat, and they simply find it very difficult. It's almost impossible for them to survive in the presence of feral predators. And we do this at a landscape, continental scale. We move species right across Australia. But just touching on, somebody was talking the other day about permitting and regulation. One of our critters is a woylie. It looks like a small wallaby, about yay big. We've reintroduced and built populations at Mount Gibson in Western Australia with a plan to reintroduce them across Australia, rewild across the country. It took 2.5 years and 17 permits to enable that to occur. My wife and I used to live in Cairns, and for those who don't know Australia, Cairns is sort of up here. We had a dog, an introduced species to Australia. We put the dog in the back of the car and we drove to Perth, where we now live over here. Didn't have to talk to anybody about it, didn't have to ask any questions. But to stop a species from going extinct took 2.5 years and 17 permits. It's a friggin' obnoxious situation that's the world we have to live in, that our value set is completely mismatched. Everything we do is underpinned by science. We have 88 ecologists, we have 38 PhDs at AWC, a couple of them sitting here with us today. This work underpins everything we do. It is the basis on which our integrity, the relationship with our donors, relationship with our partners is built, that we're a science-informed conservation management organisation. Like all good organisations, you have a strategic plan. We launched our strategic plan last year, and I'm just going to quickly touch on some of the highlights about it, but I think it's worth to recognise it's great to have a strategic plan, but if you focus on your strategic plan and ignore everything that's got you to where you are today, you run the risk of falling over in a big heap. Protect the integrity of what has got you there. Never take your eye off the ball. Make sure it's supported, in place and sustainable, and then focus on your ambition. Delivering effective wildlife conservation, that's an obvious one. That's who we are. That's what our mission is. We go forth and deliver. We will double the number of threatened species that we protect, and particularly we'll respond to the impact of a changing climate. We'll extend our conservation reach. We're going to go from 1.7% of Australia to 5% of Australia. Now that is a ridiculously ambitious target. That's 38 million hectares. But we live in a world where biodiversity is in decline, and I refuse to accept a world where we're going to let more landscapes degrade and fade away, more species go extinct, when we have an operation, a machine, a team like the AWC people to let anything like that occur. If we accept anything less than that ambition, we accept mediocre outcomes. I just refuse to accept that scenario. This is just a quick snapshot of how we're prioritising and thinking about where do we want to go. And just to dwell on that climate change point, these areas, the southwest of Western Australia, southeast Australia, up the eastern seaboard, these are areas that are modelled to be climate stable over the next century. So these are areas where we've been identifying properties. One of our most recent sanctuaries is just here in northern New South Wales, modelled to be climate stable over the next 70 years, and so we've secured that literally in the last month. Not everybody knows this yet in AWC, but we've just bought a property off the coast of Tasmania, in King Island. It's a location where 2 of the birds in Australia most likely to go extinct are present. We have an opportunity to prevent that happening. Quickly dwell on this image. It's a little bit out of date now, but the point I want to make is all of that land in blue is what we call pastoral leases. This is the cattle management country. 54% of the Australian mainland is managed for pastoralism. So it is obvious that much of our future opportunity and programs are going to come within that estate. So we have to find ways in which we can work with the pastoral industry. We have to recognise that in Australia, agriculture, forestry, pastoralism contributes $138 billion to the Australian economy. That business is not going away anytime soon. So how do we find ways to work together? Just to jump to the side and at the risk of going off on I'm a white middle-aged bloke, so I'll go off and tell rambling stories. I used to work in the mining and oil and gas industry, so completely on the dark side prior to coming to AWC. When I came into the sector, I was gobsmacked, flabbergasted on how divided the sector was, how much it was pitting people against each other, how combative it was. It was them over here and us over there. It was, no, we can't be that. We've got to find ways to bring people together. AWC were as bad as anybody in that case, and that's been part of the learning that we've had to take. We were very protective of our patch. We can't do that. We've got to think about the community in which we live. If we want to have an ambitious strategic plan, we have to look beyond our borders. We have to find ways to engage. Two of our key pastoral partnerships, Bullo River in the Northern Territory. It's a 160,000 hectare property. You can only run cattle on about 40,000 hectares. The rest of the property is too rugged. So the owners have contracted, they pay us to be there to deliver conservation management on the balance of the land. And it's just a ridiculously beautiful part of Australia. It is a wonderful place. They run a high quality ecotourism. They market AWC through it. There's a real synchronicity in terms of the value they get from the relationship and partnership as what we do as well. And we've just recently agreed with them that we're going to aim to restore Bullo to pre-European days or as close as we can get to it. And we're now working on one of our first bird reintroductions back to the site. That is a bloody cool outcome and something I'm particularly pleased with. NAPCO on the right-hand side, they have around 6 million hectares of land through Queensland and the Northern Territory. They have bilbies, the little critters, in the same paddocks as cattle. So that's really cool. So if we can find out what management model they have in place, think about that 54% of Australia that we can start to engage and develop models where we can work collaboratively. They can still run cattle, still have a commercial outcome, but we can get our conservation mission outcomes at the same time. And like Sky showed yesterday, this is a Bullo River. Left-hand side is back in 2018. Cattle, buffalo, pigs in Lake Leslie there. You can see those little huts just on top of the range. The idea was they'd take guests out there and sit up there to overlook this wonderful, wonderful wetland. Nobody's going to look at a wonderful wetland when it looked like that. In 3 years, we'd fenced it out, we'd shot out all the pigs, shot out all the buffalo, fenced out the cattle, and it looks like that. Now, I am being cheeky. It's a great wet season, it's full of water, and it looks beautiful. But the change is nothing short of remarkable. The birds are there all year round. There's fish back in the system. It's a great example of how we can work together to get these great outcomes. Strategic goal number 3 is engaging and empowering our people, attracting, empowering, keeping skilled people, fostering great leadership and safety, physical and mental well-being. It takes people to run a conservation organisation. It takes people to deliver the conservation work out in the field. It takes people we need lawyers, we need accountants, we need human resource staff. We need a suite of people, and we need to support that suite of people to be the most effective operators they can be. I won't go through the other strategic goals, but we have goals around connecting people to country, the revenue raising, the fundraising that we need to do, but fundamentally, everything is predicated upon looking after and supporting the people that deliver the conservation programs. What matters more than any reserve or species is how we work with people, including ourselves. This is a repeating theme over the last couple of days, is self-care. I am probably the biggest hypocrite in doing this, and I have to work hard on self-care and taking time out. I have to have the HR manager coming and yelling at me to make sure I'm taking leave and taking time out. It is important to look after yourself. If you're not looking after yourself, how are you going to look after your teams? This is something Ignacio has talked about over the last couple of days as well. Look after yourself. Conservation is hard. It's not all about releasing cute furry animals into the bush and it's a wonderful experience. Sometimes stuff goes wrong and we all make mistakes. I thought I might share with you probably the biggest mistake we've had at AWC and probably the toughest thing that we've had in our career. There's a bird in Australia called the night parrot, and it's one of the most rare birds, was thought to be extinct. We employed a naturalist who had detected the bird in the Queensland outback. We employed him, we dispatched him into the landscape, and he came back with feathers and photos and recordings of the bird. It was all fake. It was all fraudulent. That happened within about 6 months of me becoming the chief executive of AWC, and that's why I've got no hair on my head. My instinct at the time was, holy shit, let's lock this down. How do we control the narrative? How do we control that information? But I was surrounded by great people who provided better advice. We developed and brought in an independent external panel of investigators. They investigated it, proved that it was false and fraudulent. We expunged all that information. We published the report. I went in front of the media and talked about what had happened. We were open and transparent about it. So it became a position that even now, when we're working with a major donor in the United Kingdom, and he's done this extensive due diligence on us, and we offered this up and we said, we want you to be aware of this. This has happened about 10 years ago. And the report came back saying, great, you managed that really well. That's a good example of good organisational governance and leadership. We're very happy to keep working with you. So there's that lesson inside it of when things go wrong, you can pull inwards. You want to bunker down and shelter down. Make sure you surround yourself with great people. Think about the advice that you're getting. Don't be afraid to test the advice. Don't be afraid to go elsewhere. Just to double check the advice that you're getting, that you're heading down the right path. Invest in your people and yourself. And there's been a bit of chatter in the last couple of days, and particularly with the AWC team, on succession planning. Developing yourself. You're all here, broadly, the people that have been on the program. You're all here about investing in yourself. We, as leaders of organisations, want to invest in you. We want you to be great conservation leaders over the coming decades. You're the people that are going to come back after us. You're going to kick me out of the way and take over at AWC. Invest in your people and invest in yourself. Connect people to nature. I want to show you this little bit of a video. It's my favourite bit of video that we have at AWC. So that little critter is what's called a northern bettong, another one of our little animals about this big. Those people there are from the Gugabadan Aboriginal community in North Queensland. The northern bettong was once common up the North Queensland high altitude ranges. There's about 500 of them left in the wild. We've brought them into one of our fenced area safe havens, and the community came up. It's one of their totem species. They'd never seen one. So now we've got the community being involved, we've got kids being involved, and the excitement and joy that we're bringing back into the landscape and into the communities. Really, that is probably my favourite piece of imagery, and we've got some great imagery. That is my favourite piece. I'm just going to run a short video, a couple more slides, and then I'm done.
Australia's unique biodiversity is facing a crisis. Introduced predators like feral cats and foxes, feral herbivores, weeds, mismanaged fire, and the impact of a changing climate are driving Australia's wildlife to extinction. Australia already has the worst rate of recent mammal extinctions in the world, and scientists predict more species will become extinct over the coming years unless we take urgent action.
Australia now is the guardian of a unique collection of animals, mammals, birds, insects, flowers, unlike anything else in the world. And it's all in your hands.
Australian Wildlife Conservancy takes a practical, science-based approach to conservation. It's an innovative model that involves working alone or in partnership with pastoralists, Indigenous groups, government, private landholders and universities to deliver the best possible outcomes for wildlife on a vast landscape scale.
That's why AWC is so very important. And science runs through the whole activities of AWC in a most admirable way. There are a lot of ingredients to success in conservation. Part of it, of course, is money. Part of it, of course, is having the area where you can do things. Part of it, of course, is having science behind you. And part of it, of course, is having dedicated people who give their lives to dealing with these problems.
Today is Sir David Attenborough's birthday, and so it's a very cool day, and I've had the pleasure of meeting Sir David, and it's like meeting your granddad. We're sitting there having cups of tea and bickies, and we took a photo together, and we've got tea stains and biscuit crumbs down our shirts, and it's one of my treasured photos of many that I've got. But as David said, it's about people. These are my leadership principles that I use. I don't always succeed. I'm a human just like everybody else. We all make mistakes. But it's about striving to be a better version of yourself each day. Model the way. The standard you set is a standard that others will aspire to. Inspire a shared vision. This is not about the organisational vision. It's about the vision within your teams. It's about the vision for yourself. What is your vision? Inspire a shared vision. Challenge the process. One of the worst things I hate to hear is we've always done it this way. It drives me berserk. There's always a better way of doing something. Challenge the process. Enable others to act. I see this as my core job. This is my job description in one sentence. Enable others to act. My job is to get the resources, financial, human, the tools, organised legislative support, all the things that we need to deliver, then get out of the way and let the team who are the experts get out there and deliver and encourage the heart. We are nothing without encourage the heart. Everything that we do is predicated on this. And whilst we do a lot of science and we think with the head, we all operate from the heart. The way we bring people to conservation, to nature, is about engaging the heart. So just to sum up, be curious. Don't just accept the status quo. Be curious. Be bold. We've set a bold strategic plan, and I make no apologies for it. Be urgent. Let's not wait. Whilst the world is full of doom and gloom, the opportunity we have as a movement at a global level is profound. We have an opportunity over this coming decade to truly transform not only things on the ground, but community attitudes to nature, that nature will be truly valued. Get out there and get stuff done. Go forth and deliver, but most of all, find the joy in what you do and get out there, get stuff done, and have fun doing it. Thank you.